Immigrant Nation, we aim to please and fail at it because we are not about pleasure. We are about knowing why you're here and what impact you want to leave behind you. Born in Moscow, Soviet Union, Semyon Dukach immigrated to the United States at the age of 11. He pursued his higher education in computer science, earning a Bachelor of Science from Columbia University and a Master's from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. We know about Semyon because of his MIT Blackjack team and their prominence in the Blackjack world. But that's not all about his achievement. Besides playing as a strategic investor and later co-founder of Amphibian Investments, leading teams whose exploits were chronicled in Ben Mesrier's book, Busting Vegas. Notably, Dukach was the only team member referred to by his real name in Mesrier's account. He has since transitioned from playing blackjack to becoming an investor and has invested in over 100 startups. Please join us as we have our conversation with Semyon. Semyon, if I was to jump in an elevator with you and we have about a minute and a half, what is the one and only question you would want me to ask you?
The one question in the elevator. Well, you can ask me, how I'm doing. You can say hello. Yeah, and it's Semyon, by the way. The name is pronounced Semyon. So I run the venture capital fund called One Way Ventures, which backs exceptional immigrant founders in the United States. I did play some blackjack many years ago, and used to make a lot of angel investments and do a bunch of other cool stuff. Happy to talk about any of that. Best question is the one in the moment. Not a kind of question, I would say.
So, reading about you, you've been described as, and I quote, a vocal advocate for change makers and those who see the world differently. What is that supposed to mean?
Well, I haven't heard of a vocal advocate for change makers. I mean, life is about change, right?
That's right.
And what's immigration? It's just a one-way journey, right? When you just kind of buy the ticket and realize there's no way back. Like, you believe in your future, you believe in your own vision of your future. You think you can do greater things, and whatever that means to you, than maybe others, and you just got to do it, right? Like, change is life, I guess.
You say change is life. What does that change look like for you from age 11 to the day you first got into college as an immigrant?
I mean, the experience itself, like, we were refugees, right? Me and my sister were young. My parents, they knew nothing about the world outside the Soviet Union. Like, they didn't really believe whatever propaganda accounts, they were there, but they didn't actually know anything about what it was like. Like, they weren't allowed to take any documents. You had to renounce your citizenship. You were basically like traitors to the homeland, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it was like you could take like $100 total for the family, I didn't know the language. We were in various places, temporarily in Austria and then in Italy, along with a bunch of other folks in that predicament. And I ended up getting a refugee status to come to the U.S. Lived in projects in New Jersey for a few months. I guess my dad got some English. My parents got some English classes, and my father was able to get a job somehow magically in Texas, and I ended up in Houston, Texas. So what was it like? I mean, I don't know. It was an adventure for sure. I was often confused. I would say the only real, I got beat up a lot. Like, I got into fights. Not really into fights. I got beat up as a better statement than I got into fights because I didn't know how to do that. Maybe the difference was in Russia. I kind of had a better idea of why I was being beaten, whereas in Texas it was really, inexplicable. because you don't understand. Like you look at someone the wrong way, like you don't know how people are supposed to look at each other, right? Like in a completely different environment.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't know. That part was tough, but like I had a lot of advantages too. Like I had parents who read me books, and then I read a lot of books, and other things, intangible things. And I guess I took an interest in video games at first, and then eventually, like years later, I got like a first computer and got into computers.
Semyon, you summarize a very long time really well. And unfortunately, you can't hide the pain behind your voice. And so, looking back, living Russia as a refugee, coming to the US, and growing up in Houston, those can be what most people would consider a tumultuous time for you. But you found a way to cope. And the idea of hanging out here at the Immigrant Pod is really, how do we learn to become better human beings? How do we learn to cope with situations that sometimes can be beyond us? Walk us through how you learned how to cope with, one, being in a foreign land, two, bullies, and three, what did books do for you in helping you cope?
Yeah, I mean, I guess books could be an escape into the imagination in some sense, but maybe it's a source of inspiration. Like if you don't have, all the right mentors and whatnot around you, you might find them in the heroes you read about. Coping, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure it's all different. Like, birth is also a traumatic experience where you dropped into an even more strange environment, and I really think it's more of an opportunity. I'm not sure that I view that kind of pain, or really any kind of pain, as necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I think it's a necessary thing. It's like it forges you, right? That you get strength from it.
Yeah. So I don't know about you, but for most immigrants, your parents really pound on the idea of education and really get really tough about their children getting the right education, because they know that is the key to how you get to a place where you can make impact in life. The love of books for you, was that just something you found yourself into, or was it because it was fed down your throat by your parents?
That's a good question. I think there was probably some pressure for particular types of books, maybe, but and maybe like when I was very young, I don't know, 4 or 5 or something. The vague memories of being like forced to literally learn how to read, right? But generally, no. Like I have this personality where it's like really hard to force me to do anything. Like I just resist any sort of control, very strongly, as many entrepreneurs do. And actually, that my parents, like, I'm very grateful to them for taking this like crazy bold leap, taking a lot of risk, because they're not necessarily risk takers by personality that I am, right?
I would beg to differ with you, sir.
Well, no, they're not. Like they did this tremendous risky thing, right? But it was
Yes.
not. It was not something they found easy and natural to the way they like today take the kinds of risks. I think you surviving over there was mostly about not sticking your neck out and really like trying to blend in and keeping your mouth shut. Which I wasn't very good at, and so. Like, just to give you some background, like my grandparents, they were Jewish. They were like in these shtetls, these little villages that they were allowed to live in Ukraine, basically. Somewhere on the border of Belarus, but like my father's parents were both from the same village in Ukraine, and they all like moved to Moscow when the Communist Revolution happened, like around 1917. And my father's father in particular, was like a communist, and he ended up like going to Europe to like foster communist revolutions there and whatnot, idealist. And he came back to when he came back to Russia, to the Soviet Union. He was just like arrested and very quickly executed for no obvious reasons, because like if you've been abroad, you must be a spy. That kind of that kind of reasoning. Like it was like 1937. Stalin's purges. My father was 9 years old at the time, and so like that experience was formative for him. And so there was like a tremendous fear and distrust of of the state, of all the conventional systems around them. So that's kind of one of the things that motivated them to leave. But their main motivation in taking this crazy, huge risk, as they've always told me, and I very much believed them, was just that they were certain that like I wouldn't like make it to adulthood, that I would literally be killed like by the time I'm 20 or something, or whatever, early 20s, because just the military service there had a type of culture where they knew that seeing my personality even as a little kid, they knew that like I would be one of the ones that just would not survive. It's like the tolerance for trying to like go your own way. There was no tolerance for that. That's the one thing there was no tolerance for, and they saw enough by that age, even by 10, that like I would be the kid that would just keep going and keep acting out until he was dead. Like literally nothing would stop me. And so they were afraid. They were literally afraid. They thought that I would not, no matter what they do, I wouldn't try to conform to the degree necessary to survive. And so they thought they needed to get me the hell out of there.
I am assuming that is that entrepreneur spirit inside of you that was speaking as early as the age of 10. When did you really learn how to drive that spirit toward business? What was the discovery phase like for you?
Oh, towards business, yeah. I mean, didn't really do business per se until, I guess, like I was in graduate school until I played Blackjack. I channeled it into the computer stuff like programming, and because I could build whatever I wanted to, and just general troublemaking. But I don't think, I didn't like have. No way, maybe no. You know what the standard story? If I forgot, the story that like every entrepreneur says that when they were whatever tiny, they set up a lemonade stand and they charged for the lemonade. I did do that. Like I did the lemonade. I just remembered I did absolutely like many set up the lemonade. And no, I didn't like. It wasn't when the passerbys who you make the lemonade for asked me what charity you're raising the money for. Like there was no freaking charity. Like I was just like, what do you mean charity? I could use 50 cents of the lemon mix to sell a pitcher for the collective $10. That's not going to charity. Like it was survival. It was just like it was. I don't know. It was obvious. It was very, very much like yeah.
So nobody just wakes up and gets to college and decides, you know what, I want to play blackjack. Now, if that's your story, I would be very surprised. But walk us through the journey of.
It was because of it was what you said. It was actually the culture of reading, the culture of books that made that happen in a way. Because, like, we were in Houston, and like I rode. The only thing to do was like I had a bike, and I rode the bike to some intersection, and it had like a convenience store and a Pac-Man game. Like you put a quarter in, and you play Pac-Man, the video game. It's like 1980 or 81 or something, and the quarter didn't last very long, and I could pretty much get like one quarter, like maybe a couple of times a week at most. That's what I could get, and so I was frustrated in that. It only lasts a couple of minutes and it's over and you lose. And so the only thing I knew how to do was go look for answers in books. I couldn't ask my parents about how to play Pac-Man. I didn't have any friends. I didn't speak any English, so I actually went to the local library and tried to look up Pac-Man in the car catalog. There was nothing in that, so I got the bus to downtown, and I went to the main, Houston City Library, and there was there was one book, there was one paperback in the library system that could order that basically was the instructions for how to beat Pac-Man, how to play forever, and you memorize these patterns and whatever. So I studied that book and memorized the whole book, and I went back and the quarter lasted I could play Pac-Man, for one quarter until I got tired of it because it was boring. It actually killed the game. It wasn't even fun to play Pac-Man anymore because you can just keep going, right? It's not fun. There's a lesson in that as well. But that having done that, now that Pac-Man was boring, the only thing to do was to go back to the library and to look up the author of the book and see if he has any other books, And he did. His name was Ken Houston, and all his other books were about beating blackjack, because that's what he did. And he did some other stuff. He ran some stock exchange on the West Coast, and I think he ended up dying early. it was like in the late 70s when they opened the casinos in Atlantic City. It was where he made a lot of money running teams. So I kind of, and I read them, and to the extent I could understand the language, I read them. I guess the language improved from things like that. It motivated you to practice to read, and other things too. But I forgot all about that. But many years later, I arrived at MIT. I'm in graduate school. And I'm building interesting things. I'm like working on a thesis to move money on the internet, basically like very first, really the very first protocol for kind of like PayPal or Venmo, but like, before the web, like really early. Mm-hmm. It's interesting, but because I'm trying to, the reason I chose that was that I wanted some like practical application. I was kind of looking for something like business, I guess, even subconsciously. Because the rest of that group was more theoretical. It's like the theory of how you could build an internet, right? But yeah, like I said, I built a lot of systems. I did a lot of programming all through college. But after I finished undergrad, which was in New York, I got married early, and I ended up with my wife graduating early. We both graduated early, like by taking extra classes, and got 7 months like to just travel around. We did a trip around the world, like with no minimal budget, like $10 a day or something. A full around the world 7 months, like backpack with a little tent, and just hitchhiking mostly. So Southeast Asia and like, all the way around. And that experience, which was amazing in many ways, pretty confidence building that you can survive that, right? Like without like any real planning or anything. It's just that when and during that, like I guess I got a letter that I got into these grad schools, and then I came back and then started MIT. But like I wasn't as excited about sitting behind a screen and building things on my own as I thought I would be, and that's why I was like already like the thesis was something that was more practical, but I was also just eager to, I guess, escape into the real world. I was excited about the actual world and the actual people in it, and I thought, they're actually surprisingly mostly friendly and good, so it was that experience, I think, that made me look for kind of an escape hatch from the world of just like building inside computers. So then I actually literally saw a poster on the wall, like with the existing MIT Blackjack team was looking for like more players, but it's something that I would have passed right by. But having known about what it is from the books from my childhood, and having been in a frame of mind where I'm really looking for some new adventure, I absolutely went and met them and like worked my ass off. I didn't know how to play cards. I didn't know anything about cards. But I was just like, it was the opportunity of a lifetime for me. And it was like I woke up and like practiced, counting the cards, like first thing in the morning, last thing at night. Like really, I did it very intensely. And so of course I became, one of the real strong players very quickly, and went with their trips, and within, that made some money in that group, but like very quickly that group kind of fell apart, and I ended up basically being the leader of like one of the two surviving teams, new teams, and the rest is in the story is already talked about plenty.
That is profound to hear, right? Because what I just had was pockets of insight, and those pockets of insight are marshaled by massive amounts of work behind being really proficient at that one thing, right? You became really proficient at getting to understand how to play a game, and then you killed the game, and then you became really proficient at doing the things, and you kept going, and you graduated early and took this trip across the globe and came back and again zeroed down in one thing and took massive action and ended up becoming one of the best in the world. As an angel investor, the lessons you had learned in your past, your survival story from your parents and grandparents in Russia, your journey to America, your survival story in Houston, where really you had minimal friends or no friends, but you found a way to cope. If you hammer those things together, looking back, we mostly are not able to see our vision of the future. But looking back, we can see things that put themselves together to be able to tell our story. What were some of those fundamental things that, when you look back, you can really see that defined who you are today?
Yeah, that's a good question. Certainly this rebellious, like anti-establishment bias, uh, and it's all about balance at the end of the day. And as you get older, you maybe moderate those urges with the desire to actually fit into a structure and to learn from others and whatnot, right? But I definitely had the fire in my belly. Like I had, maybe all people do, it's not beaten out of him. But in my case, it wasn't, I suppose. Right. So the innate default to just doing whatever whether or not other people tell you it's possible or advisable, just being independent, like creative about the motivations, about your finding your interests, your desires. Yeah, I just had that in me already, but then, as far as motivations, they have actually really evolved. When I played blackjack, it was just there was only two real motivations. One was just prove that do something impossible with a team of rebels, pirates, whatever. We were these kids who actually beat the house, which everyone knows you can't beat the house. People, if you told people about it, they just assumed you're full of it. They assumed that you're some compulsive gambler who thinks they're winning when they're really losing, right? But we knew we really were winning, and we certainly knew that the casinos knew that we were winning because they were chasing us and kicking us out and whatnot. So that was pretty clear. It was validating. Yeah. But and the money, right? And the money, but which was great. If you've never had any, we were pretty poor. My dad didn't have to keep the job for that long, right? It's we definitely struggled all through high school, right? So that was a motivation, and that part I think really changed eventually, because after the blackjack team I ran was successful, right? It's for blackjack team, and it wasn't successful by the measure of the companies we invest in now that make billions successful, but we made a few $1 million between a bunch of people working hard, but still it was successful. But there was no point, okay, so we made the money, now what, right? There was no ongoing source of satisfaction. It wasn't it was scaling to some huge organization. It was just it just kept making that money, and that in and of itself just isn't sustainable or interesting to me. Which is the same reason that many successful traders on Wall Street give it up and go look for fulfillment. And when I went traveling around the world, I made quite a few of those. People who just burn out on that, and they just want to discover themselves, right? Because at the end of the day, productive life is actually about serving some other people who are then grateful to you for whatever it is that you do for them. That's what business really is, right? It's not finding some way to grab something for yourself and be excited about how much your friend group is smarter than everybody else. That's not a source of sustainable, happiness or purpose or meaning. So, and I didn't understand it then when I was a kid. I didn't understand, and I also didn't understand the benefits of that, because when there's also benefits when you live a life of service on some level. You build a reputation when you actually can help people in a meaningful way. People respect you, and then more value comes to you. In the case of investing, it just means you get to invest in better companies, because better folks stop by and talk to you before taking money from others. But just none of that I understood. But I would say I did start understanding it pretty early. While I was playing blackjack, I started getting bored, and then this World Wide Web thing happened, and the work that I was doing at MIT would have been far more relevant. And so between missing kind of the interesting, deeper technology and the learning, and the excitement of the new internet becoming a mainstream giant thing, and not some dorky thing that only a few people know about. Anyway, I just one day just stopped. I stopped even investing with the blackjack guys. I'm still friends with some of them. Some of them still play. Went to one of their weddings not too long ago in Las Vegas, but like I completely lost all interest in doing it or participating in any way. And I started a software company, and like right away, like what I was looking for was there, because as soon as you get a customer, it's not just they send you a check for, that can be, pretty nice, but like then they you can tell they're grateful. You solved some problem, like your software, whatever you built, whatever you sold, like created value, right? And people are genuinely, grateful to you for creating it and for giving it to them, regardless of how much they paid for it. They're grateful that they got it from you. And, that was the missing thing for me, like this sense that, I'm not just like the rebel who does my own thing. I'm actually someone who is wanted and needed, right, by others. At the end of the day, that's the yin and the yang. You can't just entirely ignore society, right, and just do whatever you want, or whatever you can. We're still social creatures. At heart. And so, I would say that to answer your question more succinctly, that the main part about myself wasn't there until kind of that time in my early 20s when I was transitioned from Blackjack to actually building an actual business.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So you got bored from playing Blackjack and found yourself transitioning back to a passion you had started in college. In the many years that you have spent in studying businesses, investing as an angel investor, on and on and on, how did you zero down on deciding you were going to focus most of your effort, time, and resources on investing in immigrant ventures?
Well, that was a longer journey. I think to the degree that I made angel investments, I think there were always a lot of immigrants, probably at least half or so, simply because that was my network, right? I was not like many immigrants in tech, like in the US, you naturally just meet a lot of other immigrants. Like I have more in common with immigrants to the US from other countries than I do with people who are born here who haven't gone through that experience. And of course, I have much more in common with the immigrants than I do with like people who happen to be, who are also born in Moscow and still live there. I have very little in common with those people, right? And it's true in general. Like immigrants tend to know a lot of other immigrants, even from like completely different countries, because it's an experience they share. But the specific idea of a fund, well, my overall trajectory, right, was at first I didn't know I was an investor. Like I started my own company, and the first one did reasonably well. I sold it in '99, and then started something else, and I kind of made occasional angel investments on the side. First, I started like meeting other CEOs because there were like groups, like peer groups that would meet occasionally, and there's some like old guys who would kind of come in and mentor. There was some tiny like support network. Like what today is like my Combinator and Techstars, but back then it was more informal, and there was no investment there. But like through that, like I really saw the benefit of like the peer group, right, and the mentorship. And then when I sold my company, I was asked to come back and be a mentor, even though like I was much younger than the other ones. And that was kind of cool, and I really liked that. Like I tried to learn how to do that well, and ended up like from the occasional angel investment, I started sort of writing more checks into like the companies of the other people I met that way. And anyway, it was for quite a few years. I still thought like I was an entrepreneur. I was going to start some big disruptive business, and the angel investing was just something people do on the side. And then at some point, like I don't know, 4 or 5 years later, I had like a mental leap. I realized that I never have been as you mentioned getting bored of this or that. Like I got bored of a lot of things, right? Yeah. And so one of the things I got bored with is whatever company I started, I got bored of it, and kind of realized. And I would always talk about like the next company, even though I was still running this one. If people ask me at a party what I did, I said, well, I have this company, but really it's not that exciting. But really, I'm thinking about this or that. And then I kind of had this realization that with angel investing, I never felt that way, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I'm not an entrepreneur at all. Like I don't want to build a big business, not really, because to build a big business you have to really stick with something for a long time and never stop. And that's how I felt about the investing. I realized that that's who I am, that's who I want to be. I want to like put in some money because I do want to kind of share the vision, share the belief, share the dream of like some particular founder and not like others, right? And then I just want to help a little, like for maximal impact, was just a little time, a lot of advice, empathy, care, love, really, like, but never to actually have a lot of them in parallel. Like that's just in my nature. Maybe it's the ADD or whatnot, but like I ever since then. But like that's how I realized I knew who I was. I was still like, I don't know, maybe very early 30s. So I don't know, 25 years ago, I knew who I was, and that's never changed again. I was never bored. I was never considering doing something else. I've never once considered like just doing one company. I've never considered like anything other than this role of like, because by people, right? Because you also have to love your customers. You can't serve the whole world, and my customers are founders, tech entrepreneurs, right? Who want to build disruptive things. Like they're just my people. And then you got to focus on something. So the immigrant thing, there was another phase in between, because like angel investing is also like very informal. It's whatever you want it to be. It's anyone who has some money is an angel investor. Like you don't get a degree in angel investing, right? Instead of like spending your money to go on vacation, buy a car, you just put it into some startup, right? Anyone could do that, right? And I just got to the point that I was doing that a lot, like because I did well with some of them, the money came back already, and like I had more of it, and I didn't really want to, have a lavish lifestyle, whatever. I did buy a helicopter at that time and learn how to fly it. That was about the extent of it, but it was more about because it was so hard to learn to fly than about owning it. And in fact, at least back to the schools so they could teach others, like it was a business too, right? So like generally that's it. Like I didn't have anything else too fancy. All the money that I got back from the investing went into more investing. And I thought I'd do it for the rest of my life. I was super happy. It went on for years, and it accelerated. And like I became kind of somewhat known and respected. I was one of the people, one of the most active investors, at least in this part of the U.S. and the Northeast. And I was investing more in California. I was doing some in Europe. But the very unexpected change in my trajectory was that one of the best, most well-known, respected startup accelerators, which is an institutional organization called Techstars, actually approached me out of the blue and asked me to take over and run their program in Boston, which was one of the strongest, oldest programs in that system. And I've never had any other job. Like I've never, even thought or considered that I could be part of some other structure, and ended up being, I was very surprised I took it on, and I ran that as the managing director of that program for several years. And that's when I kind of experimented with various strategies, because I had a lot of control about how I ran it. So it was that type of organization, they didn't have a lot of central control. You could kind of do things your way, and learned a lot. That's where I understood more about venture capital and other investors and where things fit together, and a lot of other stuff, right? And how to bring on other people who mentor the founders, and not just spend my time, but actually leverage it with a whole community of people who want to help others. And only after that, I got to the point where that wasn't really, challenging enough maybe for me, and I wanted to create something of my own like that, but something that could scale and be there after me. And I was also getting to the age where you could maybe really do one big, huge, challenging thing still, right? And so then I knew the thing I would create would have to be a venture capital fund, because that's the scalable, greater version of investing, right? There's nothing else that I could really possibly do. And then within that, what do you focus it on? Because it's kind of commoditized. You need some unique brand, you want to build something that's different. And I knew it had to be some kind of mission, because the mission inspires you work harder. Founders of companies that have a mission, investors know that you don't want to invest in a founder who just wants to make a bunch of money. They need to be driven by some sense of purpose to actually build what they want to build. And so and a fund is also a startup in a way. It's a new organization. So I knew there had to be a mission, and I knew it had to be a venture capital fund. And that was a question of finding a mission that was mine. And actually, one of the other angels in Boston, named Joe Caruso, who's great, angel investor, well loved, well respected, meets everybody, super accessible. Anyway, he actually suggested that because he observed that I had gone to a protest. Trump was just elected for the first time, and there was a bunch of people with visas couldn't get in at the airport a few days after the first inauguration of Trump. And I found myself at the airport with a sign jumping up and down. I'm I haven't done that since I was an undergrad. It's not something, I'm not very politically, active at all. But I was, energized around that point, and he had noticed it. It's like, why don't you just start a venture capital fund, to focus on the immigrant founders? Everyone knows they do better than the ones born here. And yeah, he gave me the idea, and within a few months, I left Techstars and started raising the first fund, and we were off to the races. This was 2017. It was 8 years ago. Now we're in the third one. So yeah, that's how it gets started.
Very, very, very interesting. So you set up a venture capital fund and you're focusing more on immigrants. The transition phases in life that you've gone through, when do you realize it's time for you to transition, to go to the next? Because most people get comfortable. They start something, it does pretty well, and they're like, okay, I want to stay here. And they're stuck behind the safety of what they have created. You don't seem to have had that problem.
Everybody sorry, I'm gonna just start answering. That's such a good question. I can't even wait to the end because I'm just too eager to go.
Yeah,
because everybody has fears, right? And everyone seeks comfort. And so the thing is, for some people, and definitely for myself, I've recognized very early on that my big fear is the fear of comfort. Comfort scares the hell out of me. I'm terrified of the idea of comfort. I remember even as a kid thinking I was going to be successful. I certainly wasn't going to be in the suburbs. I was not afraid of, dying. I was not afraid of all kinds of things. But I was so terrified of that life where that becomes a repeatable grind because the thing that I was afraid of was just death, right? And the fact that it's not forever, I was sort of very aware of that as a teenager, watching, intense films or books or whatever about that, right? And so you can't, it's just terrifying that your life will go by, right? You gotta have I guess challenges and adventures and something intense in it, and I just always knew how easy it was to get into some habit, and so I was always really afraid of that, and that's why as soon when I ran this Techstars program, it was successful. It was already very successful. I took it over, and it became somewhat more successful while I ran it. There was a local, kind of fund to fund just that program from actually local angel investors and whatnot. Some of the mentors invested in it, and that fund had above, market returns that I didn't have to worry about raising it again. It was always oversubscribed. And the demo day, it was at the House of Blues. It was 1,100 seats in the House of Blues. We filled it up. There's people it was the best thing like that in the area, in the ecosystem. And Boston is one of the top 5 ecosystems for building startups in the world. It's not San Francisco Bay Area is far the strongest, but Boston is great, and this was the best program. There was 20 different programs like that. This was the best one, right? And it was very comfortable. First it was a little weird, but after doing it 2 or 3 times, it's nice to stand there on stage, and it's nice to walk into any event in tech, some VC's party, and everybody knows who you are and just assumes you must be very good because you are that. You don't have to really prove yourself. That's scary to me. Then you're just sitting there and what, right? And talk about your next vacation. It was still exciting to of course to select the teams and to help them, but it was very structured, and I just thought it was too easy, to just you could do that for the rest of your life. That's terrifying. And I knew it was time. I wanted to. What I'm doing now is very hard. It's hard to start from scratch in the space and define your fund not around some vertical focus with a lot of expertise, but around this concept that we only back immigrants and we are all immigrants, and our network believes in people who make that journey, really believes in the concept of true equality of opportunity. It's a human rights thing, right? This idea that the random circumstances of your birth, what papers, your parents get when they take the baby home, that can't limit what the hell you can do. What does that have to do with anything, right? If you want to build a business in America, you're going to build a business in America. You want to build it in in Greece, you go to Greece and do it there, and like what,
Right.
some immigration official is going to stop you because you don't have the right stamp? Like what does that mean? I mean, that's that innate kind of. And of course, that's not the world today. I'm not like that's not the real world, right? Like
Yeah.
we have countries, and and I happen to be a citizen of only this one, and I love it. It's a great country, and you know what I'm saying. So I'm not like some crazy open borders advocate, but fundamentally, in terms of there's this feeling of right and justice. Like I feel that like if someone just like actually just like wants to build a business, or for that matter, wants to just like get a job and work and produce and like, be a productive member of society and not to threaten it, they should be able to do it anywhere in the world, in theory.
Yes.
But I don't know how to get there, right? But in theory, I do believe that that's and I think on some level, like everybody in our network, like all these, we have like a lot of, a couple of hundred entrepreneurs we backed collectively, maybe 70 companies. We have like 200 something limited partners, like investors who invested with us. We have like this network of like really successful, like unicorn founders, with $1 billion outcomes that are helping out. We have all those things. And I think we all kind of on some level share that belief. Look, what you said in the very beginning, the immigrant nation, that's the podcast is the immigrant nation, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, yes, like in today in the physical world, like American, right? America is my nation, but I'm also a member of this like other nation that's like a virtual nation, and it's very real. Like we are the immigrant nation, right? Because we have made that leap, and that kind of binds us forever with other people who've done it.
America is a very proud immigrant nation. And as an immigrant, I'm not going to say it's an easy road to that pride. It's a tough road, and that's what makes it beautiful, right? When you make the choice or the leap to migrate from one country to another, that choice is never easy. You're going to new and strange, and being able to transition to do that and to succeed in your new life is a very interesting journey, and only immigrants can and understand that journey. So while we're still at the immigrants conversation, you've invested in a lot of organizations. What are the things you're looking at? When I'm sitting next to you and I'm trying to pitch you, what are some of the things you're looking at that would cause you to say no to me?
Well, there's you're kind of looking for reasons to say yes, because there's so many reasons to say no. It's easy to say no, right? Like this is very early stage investing. You have to, and we don't make just given with the size and the nature of the organization. We are very active. Like we spend a lot of we might own 10% of the company typically, right? But we spent a lot of time with it. We care a lot about it, so we can't have a lot. Like maybe like 4 or 5 times a year between like 3 or 4 people who are actually doing investing at our fund, like total. Like that's what we invest in, and we, there's a couple of thousand that come like that pitch to us on some level for the decks or whatever, and there's probably a couple of hundred certainly over 100, maybe 200 that we meet with and begin a little bit too, and maybe invest in 4 of those, 5 of those, right? Yeah, it's not like you don't need a lot of reasons to say no. What you're looking for, well, because it is a fund structure, it's not like an angel investing where like any positive return is great. You're looking for something. It has to be like a large return, right? So we can only invest in people who are trying to go after like building a big disruptive, like industry changing kind of business that could be worth, typically it's a couple of billion at least. To be a success, like we need to be able to, have one of these investments return like an entire fund. And there's a lot of dilution later. There's other people coming in, need more capital. So it really it needs to be something large. So most people aren't trying to build something large, shouldn't try to build something large. Like this is a particular, most businesses don't need venture capital. Like it's a specific niche for the type of high risk, high reward kind of investment. So that's one thing that's just clearly we look for. And then of course you want like a person who has like a strong vision of the future. They have to believe something very strongly, and then they have to listen. Not every, sometimes people like that just don't listen at all, and it's hard to work with them, right? They have to listen and show curiosity to your advice or opinions, and then they most certainly have to not actually follow. It's like if they're following my advice, they're not going to get that far because, what do I know? Like, I'm investing in many different things. They're supposed to figure this one thing out. So sometimes they can, very rarely they might follow it, but they need to like listen and be interested in why you believe what you believe, and hopefully you believe something different, right? And then you look for a bunch of other stuff, of course. Like, it has to be defensible. Like, it has to be something that if it does become somewhat big, other people with more money can't, because like we don't have the biggest fund, other people can't just copy it or whatnot. So something that has some there has to be, a special business, one with what's called a moat, like a way to protect itself and enable it to further scale. Team, like what they have to be able to inspire, like really strong people to follow them. That's not everyone can do that, to communicate all of this vision, and of course depth, like the real technical depth for sure, but which doesn't necessarily mean a particular kind of education, but often you can get some of that there. Those are some of the things.
Immigrant Nation, today we have the privilege of hosting Semyon Dukach, a remarkable individual whose journey epitomizes the immigrant experience. Arriving in the US from Moscow at the age of 11, Semyon navigated his way from leading the famed MIT Blackjack team to becoming a successful entrepreneur and investor. As the founding partner of One Way Ventures, he dedicates his efforts to supporting immigrant entrepreneurs, reflecting his beliefs that the immigrant journey fosters unparalleled resilience and innovation. Beyond business, Semyon co-founded Cash for Refugees, providing vital assistance to those affected by the war in Ukraine. His story is a testament to the profound impact immigrants have on our societies, no matter where we migrate to. Semyon, tell our listeners where they can find you on social media.
On social media, LinkedIn, Semyon Dukach, easy to find. Fairly uncommon name. LinkedIn, Twitter, I guess X, Facebook. I'm out there somewhat. Not that hard to find. Or just Semyon at onewayvc.com. One Way is the venture capital fund.
Very, very interesting. So what really inspired you or drove you toward giving back, and how has the war in Russia and Ukraine affected not just your international business ventures, but your person?
Yeah, I mean, like I already said, like when I didn't have a culture of philanthropic giving when I was a kid, but as I became successful over the years, I took an interest at some point while still like. Before I did like a lot of angel investing, when I was just kind of growing into it, I was thinking that maybe I should do something like more philanthropic, and I went around, I looked and tried to meet people who are respected in that world, and actually got to meet Jimmy Carter, former president, because like especially like the kind of peacemaking, international election monitoring part of that organization was just like the best in the world, incredibly respected. Like it did really huge impact. They also did other stuff like vaccines that was interesting, but that was the part that interested me, and I actually got to briefly meet the president, which was super cool. And like the guy who was the former chief of staff actually ended up like meeting with me again. I flew down to Atlanta again just to give advice about like how to think about that, and the conclusion of that advice was like, just keep doing what you're doing. Like the angel investing, if I just try to like be more philanthropic about that, and actually like just care more about helping the founder than how much money I'll make in the investment, like that was probably better for me than trying to get into like trying to help Israel make peace with Palestinians or whatnot, like where I don't know anyone. Like I kind of had that realization from that mentoring, I guess, experience, and then just the angel investing really got more and more successful. Actually, and the more I applied that, I occasionally remember to think that way on purpose. Like the lesson was to like try to be more philanthropic. It helped me because I was naturally good at like the deal making, and from the Blackjack team, like look at arithmetic calculations of like the odds of how much I make. Like that came natural. I didn't have to work on that, and so I can remind myself to like care more and really pick the people I just want to help and think of it that way. and I kind of, to the degree I did, it made me happier too. Like and it was more ultimate long term. It's actually more rewarding financially as well. But anyway, as far as actual formal philanthropy, didn't really do that much. I had like a charitable thing called the Troublemaker Award. It's sometime in the middle where, like, I came up with some crazy scheme of like $10,000 prize to someone who like really caused trouble, like went to prison, took personal risks, but somehow to make the world a better place, not to just cause harm. Like that was the idea. I gave out 3 of those. And then beyond that, I think when we started One Way, actually we set up something called One Way Foundation in parallel. Like there's a venture fund and there's a foundation, and it was just like the idea. Actually, one of the partners from I think Bain taught me that lesson once that you know from the very beginning, don't wait until you're incredibly wealthy to give away your money. Like set it up and start small in the beginning. And so the idea there was like the venture fund doesn't invest in a immigrants startup because it's a poor needy immigrant who needs our money. Like that's not what they do. We actually invest in like strongest people who often get to choose. They can take anyone's money, and we are the ones who are getting a favor, really, that they accept our money because they believe in us and how we think about venture capital, right? And so, but there's room in the world, but you also want to help, refugees and people who need a hand. It's not usually our founders who invest in who need a hand. It's just not, right? And so we set that up, and like I seeded it with like some small amount of money, $50,000 or something, and then sometimes people donate to that as they met us, and then at like holiday time we would just meet quickly and kind of pick a few charities and just distribute that money to those charities, like as one of those non-operating foundations basically. And the idea was, and we all, like all the partners actually pledge some fraction of the money they'll eventually make when the fund is very successful to that foundation, so it would in fact become larger, and later it could be quite meaningful. So we had all that set up, and it was all small dollars to organizations like I don't know, HIAS and whatever. But then when this war broke out, it was actually my wife, who's from Ukraine, like on the second day, just felt like I have to go there. I have to try to help. Like there's like people streaming across the border, and I joined her. And really, the biggest contribution is our older daughter at home at the time, who had to help out and hold that together while both of us went there. But like we had to go, and the One Way team was also very generous in letting me, and my investors like letting me spend some time, because it was a fair amount of time, and that was just, we discovered a new kind of nonprofit structure there. Basically, the only thing we could think of was literally give cash to like old people and like women with like multiple kids who are walking on foot, like without a vehicle, and just didn't understand what's happening. Like it was just very disorganized first 2 days of a big conflict, and we did it for a couple of days, and then they had to go back to work. But like I put up some social media posts that went pretty viral and ended up getting like several $100,000, like just sent like my PayPal, like very quick. Like so I had to create an operating charity and to get the tax deductible status, just like, and then do the cash was like complicated. You had to actually do it through banks and declare everything and to check everything. It was actually hard, but we ended up like, and so I basically I had a board seat from that point on. And I did make a few short trips, but my wife, she dropped everything in her life, Semyon Dukach, and she's still running that thing full time, and it ended up ultimately reaching some scale. It was called Cash for Refugees, and maybe 16,000, I think, families and like 35,000 people got the direct financial support inside Ukraine. It's mostly internally displaced people from like front to like other places. They literally, like, they were all met face to face. Their stories were recorded. It was supported like in other ways, and they got cash payments. So, and all the money was raised. All of that happened, and more recently, it actually kind of pivoted to a different direction because that just wasn't sustainable ultimately. And what she does now, and I'm like, I'm really not very involved. It's like maybe one board meeting every few months, right? That's it. But what she does is now it's programs for young women, like leadership programs in Western Ukraine that they come to in the summer and once a year, and then incredible mentors come in and inspire them from all walks of life. And so that's what it's become, and it's called C Forward Ukraine now, C-forward.org. But yeah, that was, and so the One Way Foundation money for the couple of years, like that was being boosted, just kind of went there, um, towards that nonprofit effort. So that's my kind of exposure to the nonprofit world.
So that's a very colliding, interesting perspective. You've invested most of your adult life in tech. You migrated from Russia, and out of necessity, you found yourself in Ukraine to defend the vulnerable in a way that you best understood how. The war in Ukraine has changed how we fight modern war. So how's AI and tech, because you're in tech industry, really contributing to how the modern workplace is changing, at least in your perspective?
Well, yeah, and I mean, just even if from the news, you can tell that AI and again drones, not just like in the air but on the ground as well, and various. Yeah, it's like everything. It's radically transforming warfare, and of course, even in like big defense companies, here companies like Anduril, worth many billions of dollars already, disrupting the old way, procurement for weapons development is happening. It's much more iterative now, right? And in Ukraine, really, it was the first major conflict that proved out like this is why they couldn't be overwhelmed quickly by Russia, right? Because there's a bunch of startups. In fact, like some of my trips there for the nonprofit stuff, like I've met like random Americans flying to Ukraine. In addition to the ones that like wanted to help or interested, I've met people who like were just like drone nerds. They just wanted to write software for drones, and they were going to Kiev during the war, taking a physical risk for the same reason that people have to go to San Francisco to talk about like social media startups, like because Kiev has a higher concentration of like experts in AI as applicable to drone development than any place on the planet. Because right next to it is where all the stuff can get tested quickly, and you got a military culture in Ukraine that's willing to try new things. Just fundamentally, culturally, like they're like that, and they have to do it. And you can, because otherwise, like in defense at least, the development cycles are so long, and it's very bureaucratic and staid and a little bit corrupt. A few companies, control the big budgets, and you have some new idea, you got to work with the people who have the relationships. Like it's stayed. Like companies like Anduril have changed it now, but like there it's very dynamic, and so and of course there's plenty of people motivated by the just personal desire to help people attacked, unprovoked, attacked, and there's that energy as well. But the tech of it, absolutely, it's changing, and some of it's very scary, right? Like, do we really want AI to, control killing machines out there? I mean, I don't have the answers there. Like and we haven't actually invested a lot in that area. One way, we have a couple of robotics companies. One is drones, but it's like warehouse logistic drones, and so that's not like a focus for us particularly. And we can't really invest over there in startups in Ukraine because we pay back immigrants in the U.S. because we're here, and we need to really spend a lot of time. And I've only been going like once a year recently, over there, so I don't know that much about it. But from a distance, like, I'm rooting for them to, of course, to defend themselves successfully and not to be overrun. Very much, but be very impressed with the speed of iteration around some of the technology area for sure.
So technology is changing quite a bit. When you stand in front of audiences of immigrants, you're finding yourself in a place where you have to speak about where the world is going and how tech is changing, especially if you're standing in a room full of students or young immigrants. How are you advising them to start preparing and looking at how AI is changing the world for the future? That way they can remain competitive and vital in the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, look, the progress in AI is so mind-boggling, incredibly fast recently. Of course, like most of our investments have something to do with AI one way, and that's true from many funds. But at a time like that, it's actually really hard to know, especially with this, because it could be like the most transformative change, of the human condition, like ever, right? Like there's no limit to what could change. So it's very hard. I think people who have to plan, like, I don't know, education curricula probably have a harder job than we do in terms of knowing about the future. Because, like, how do we know what to even teach kids, right? Like, we have no idea. It's going to all change. So I guess you got to teach them maybe critical thinking, maybe ethics, maybe, I don't know, working with others in the right way. But practically speaking, well, just think of it. Like, don't think about like, how can I find a career that won't be disrupted by AI? No, think about like, how can I use AI to be better at whatever I'm interested in? Like, right? Like, be the user. Like, play with the tools. Like, there's a lot of free accounts you can open. I mean, I wish I had more time to do more of that myself right now, honestly, because I see I do a little. I see my kids are doing it. One of my partners is actually utilizing, I think, ChatGPT and a couple of other LLMs to do all kinds of stuff, that we normally would have hired somebody for, or just to speed up what he is doing anyway. So that's the first obvious thing is use it, right? Use it. We have an investment in AI video platform called NIM, like NIM.video. That's been growing explosively the last few weeks, like really insane growth. If that continues, that'll be a game-changing investment for us. But point being, it's like it enables like anyone to create movies, like to actually express yourself with the whole video. Like, you couldn't do that. Like, to create a movie before, right? Like, imagine producing a movie. Like, who can, only Quentin Tarantino can spend 10 years working as a waiter in LA to get a shot at producing his first movie. Like, that's not for a lot of people, right? You have to really be nuts about that to be able to express yourself that way. But like now, like anyone can do that. Like literally, it's pretty easy. You could, your friends can like do some video. They take some old photograph, it turns into a video. People move around. You can take that, restyle it in the style of some other thing. Add lip sync sound. Like it's just all like very practical. And so, yeah, I don't know how the world will change exactly, but I know that if something like that is new and rapidly developing, the right thing to do is to use it. Try it. Think of try to answer the question yourself.
Envision AI as this magnitudinal change in the future, and I don't think there's anybody who would dispute that. Given your experiences with one-way ventures, what unique advantages do immigrant entrepreneurs bring to the development and implementation of AI technologies?
I think AI, it does a lot of the technical stuff for you, the stuff you can just like learn in school. It kind of does, but it's a perspective. It's knowing what problem to solve. I mean, I can say specifically like this particular video platform. It uses like underneath, it uses different models. It doesn't like bet on just like OpenAI or just Google or whatever. It uses different ones, and it kind of abstracts away that layer around the interface of like the movie making, right? And so part of that was having the insight that there was these like new open source models in China that weren't as good, but like were changing faster even than these ones, and like were free for the time being. And anyway, like just knowing about like what happens in China, and yeah, that's someone is unlikely to, like, this particular founder like figure that out, but like my partner Lex, one of our core three main partners, he was born in China, right? And he speaks the language and he kind of follows stuff over there. He likes tech, but he naturally like knew enough. Just being from it, having that perspective, helped him recognize that this company that's thinking about that, like that was one of the reasons we made the investment. The fact that it was thinking that way when others weren't. You look for people who could think, and like if he didn't have that depth himself, right? He probably wouldn't have noticed even that as a factor, right? Like he wouldn't have noticed. And I think, there's another company that similarly benefited from his, like we don't even invest very much. Like you have a few immigrants from China, but not that many, right? But like he's the only guy on the team really with that particular geographic knowledge. But nevertheless, it was like another one that ended up, it was like one of our most successful investments in the first fund was a company that the business in Africa is Chipper Cash. Founders were immigrants from 2 different African countries, met here, and headquartered in San Francisco. But like it's more like PayPal, Venmo type of cash, Robinhood in some sense, a bunch of like, consumer fintech services for a bunch of African countries. Lex also, led, that was actually the first investment he led when he became a partner in the fund, and he could probably appreciate that because he saw like how much bigger like the WeChat Pay, whatever feature in the Chinese, systems was than the Venmo in the US, which ended up like being a fairly small acquisition, right? Relatively small. So that he knew that sort of tech needed to be built in a market like Brazil, that's like more developing, and not one like Europe or the US. Like he had that insight before even knowing about this company. And with that insight, he noticed the business, the incredible founders. I met them, whatever, everything else worked out, and it ended up, it's a pretty successful company now, right? Like it's millions of active users in different countries. It raised, more than $100 million after we invested. So a couple of examples there, just having that. And I mean, and my partner came when he was a little kid. You know what I mean? Like it's just you don't need a lot. It's not like he has a lot of connections to it, really. But it's just the another language, another culture. I guess in my case, like maybe the nonprofit stuff in Ukraine was enabled by me just being more aware of the news in that part of the world, right? Like paying a little bit more attention, have even. And ultimate, actually, I ended up learning the language in this case because I can actually feel Ukrainian now, from when it was one country, but I don't feel Russian anyway. I feel Ukrainian, and so you couldn't easily learn language if you didn't already speak a similar language, right? Like so, I think there's just basic things give you an advantage of knowing more about the world, and with AI, like it matters more, right? Because it's having like some human instinct, some empathy, some like caring about some other part of the world, or more than one way. If you can think in like two different systems, like it's easier to like learn about a third or fourth, right? I think those are some of the advantages. You have to be with the humans. If the computers are going to do the computer thing, you have to be with the humans, and to be with the humans, it's hard to really be all completely human if you only understand like one culture, one region, one way of being human. It's really, I think you're literally more human if you know two, because that enables you to learn about others, right? Like it makes you more of a generally human person as opposed to like just a person of a group of people.
Definitely. So in what ways can AI contribute to creating more inclusive ecosystems per se that support the growth of immigrant-led startups?
I don't know. How can AI contribute to the growth of more included? I don't know. I don't really think in those terms. Like, I don't, inclusivity, I think, there's so many layers there. There's like,
let's break it down. That's the idea, right?
It's like, I think, first of all, like immigrants don't need special, like anything to succeed. Like, I think to the degree, like, honestly, like, if there are political changes in the U.S. that makes the immigration experience much more difficult and less easy, like if there's like instead of limited, there's like zero resources to whoever is let into the country legally. Let's say if they get like zero support, like nothing, no healthcare, nothing like that. They even have to bring some money in when they come, whatever it is. No, if more barriers are erected? Like I'm not, in favor of those kinds of barriers, right? I told you already what I believe about the world, but like our fund would be better. Like it would be more of a filter because we only invest in immigrants. Like so, the more challenges people have to overcome to do that, like the stronger our thesis is. Like the more likely they are to actually build a big business overcoming other big challenges. Like the filter is stronger if the experience is worse. And the people who had the hardest journeys, in a sense, make are the most like. That aspect of our selection criteria, is most effective on people who like were refugees in the boat and like had nothing and starved, like right, like then people who had like a visa that enabled things with some support. You know what I mean? So there's no, it's the and now AI. It's just another massive change, and I don't know exactly how, but ecosystems happen when there's enough people nearby that like over time there's just more and more knowledge and I guess entrepreneurial ability and investors, like people they happen, they develop inclusive. I think inclusivity. I think the free market is actually really good at rewarding inclusivity. Like I was never a fan of like the DEI programs or whatever. I just not don't believe in that sort of approach. I think the best incentive for like VCs to invest in immigrants, well, I mean, the immigrants are much more likely to generate huge returns for VCs than any other group. Like, I mean, what more do you need? Like, I hope none of the other VCs invest in immigrants. It's just, of course, everybody does, and we have an advantage in that, like, we understand them slightly better, or not in aggregate, we understand more of them, like a bigger network of people there. But like, it's not. I think people generally, like, you don't need any special AI or anything else to make venture capital investors be open to backing someone from another country. You just need them to believe that that'll generate the best returns. That's a job, is to generate returns for the investors. Now often they can't, because like if they're all like from the same like socioeconomic whatever group, they just don't know any, they don't understand them, they don't know how to evaluate them, because they don't have like degrees in right schools or whatever. Like then we have an edge, and some of those investors might want to hire people who are like that in order to themselves have an edge. But the motivation has to come there directly, I think.
Immigrant Nation, that's a wrap. Today we have been speaking with Semyon Dukach, a remarkable individual whose journey epitomizes the immigration experience. You've had it all, he's laid it down for us, and it's time for us to go out and make it possible. Arriving in the US at the age of 11, Semyon navigated his way from leading a famed MIT Blackjack team to becoming a successful entrepreneur and investor. As an angel investor and founding partner of One Way Ventures, he dedicates his effort in supporting immigrant entrepreneurs, reflecting his belief that the immigrant journey fosters unparalleled resilience and innovation. Beyond business, Semyon co-founded Cash for Refugees with his wife Natasha, providing vital assistance to those affected by the war in Ukraine. His story is a true testament of what a true immigrant can do and what our impact in the world today should be. Welcome to the Immigrant Pod, and Semyon, tell our listeners where they can catch you again on social media.
Oh, you can find me on X and LinkedIn and that whatnot, or just onewayvc.com is the website for the fund. Yeah.
Fantastic. If immigrants are looking to invest in you, what is the path?
If they're looking to invest in you mean they're looking to raise money from funds
Yes.
like ours?
Yes.
I mean, mainly you want to really start by focusing on your customers, right? People often, sometimes some of the content online and some of the tech press, like, incorrectly overemphasizes like the investor search and raising money as if it was like a goal, and people falsely believe that like the thing that's preventing them from being super successful is an ability to like raise capital, which isn't generally the case. Like it's very hard to find the path to be super successful, to have something that's so important that a bunch of customers need that much that you could build a big business. Like that's very rare, and that's the hard part, right? And then when you really have that, like it's not that hard to get the money to do it, and in fact it's not even a good thing actually. Like the less you need it, like the ideal business like needs no investment, and you just scale it and become gigantic without any money, right? And that's kind of rare, but like there's a lot of businesses that need very limited investment, and after that they can bootstrap, they can be profitable. And then there's certain ones that just need a lot of capital, and those are not as good, right? Because when you raise money, like it has to kind of be paid back before you make any, like, just to clarify that, right? It's not debt, like we just own part of the company, but we get preferred stock. All investors get preferred stock, right? And the founders have common stock, which means that if you raise 10 million, 1 million from us today and 10 million from a slightly bigger fund, in a year, and then in 10 years you end up raising like 200 million, and then you sell your company for, that same amount for 200 million, because like the market gets a little harder and it's not quite as profitable as you thought, you get zero, you lose everything, right? Like, I mean, it's not, the more you raise, you keep raising the bar for what even success is for yourself. And so, that's my first kind of message. It's like, don't even assume that you want to find that. But if you do need that money, and if you do need, a $2 million round, which is kind of our sweet spot, led by people who really care and who might understand you and your journey like a little bit better, because of who they are, who might bring more people to the table, who will be pretty motivated to want to be helpful as well. You want to meet us? Yeah, it's a one-way VC. And yeah, there's even like there's a form. You can actually submit some materials and someone will, review it. But more likely, I think if you focus on your customers and you build on building something for them, and actually, not even necessarily, you don't have to finish building it, but you don't have to have revenues, but you have to have customers. You have to, have people who are looking at what you're building, who are like having some, design partner kind of input into what it is that you're building, and it looks like it's exciting and it's big. You'll probably, in that process, you're going to end up meeting some other founders, some other investors. Like it's actually a pretty small world. And, we're in San Francisco, Boston, and occasionally in the middle of the country, like Denver, Austin, but New York, like we're not that hard to find actually. It's like everyone knows everyone, and believe it or not, yeah. And just being an immigrant doesn't significantly make that part harder. You just have to get the customers. Think about how you're going to get to the customers, not how to get to us. Like that's the main takeaway.
There is no business without customers. Semyon, thank you so much for making the time for immigrants. Before we sign off, was there something behind or in the back of your head that you were like, okay, I probably need to share with this, and I did not get you to that point?
No, I think I covered a lot of ground, actually. Thank you for having me and for letting me ramble on about all these things. There's always other topics, right? But, I randomly mentioned, I think, only like 2 of our startups, but, there's a lot of them, right? So I can talk all day about like the CEOs and what they're building and the challenges they've overcome and the ways that their immigrant experience, helped them do so. So yeah, lots of stuff. We can talk about it. It's fun. We can come back and chat about other things. So
you know what? That's my goal. That's my goal. I hope we can get together sometime before the end of the year and get really to the technical things on how to run businesses and stuff like that. Sir, thank you so very much for making the time for us this morning. Have a great day, and please come back soon.
Sounds great. Thank you for having me again. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's stay in touch.
Thanks very much.